I'm Jennifer Garner. You may know me from my other job, but I'm a business owner too. Here at Once Upon a Farm, we chose the Capital One Venture X business card because it makes everything we do even more rewarding. With no preset spending limit, our purchasing power adapts to meet our business needs. And unlimited double miles on every purchase means we earn more too. And when we travel, we get access to over 1,300 airport lounges. The Capital One Venture X business card. What's in your wallet?
Terms and conditions apply. Find out more at CapitalOne.com/VentureXBusiness.
Hey guys, it's Candace.
And it's Elena.
And you're listening to Cousins on Crime.
How are you?
I'm good. Oh, a hat.
A hat.
I see a hat has been added to Hank.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
The jingle bells have come off.
They've come off because that was your only Oh, no. You still got the nativity scene up.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, I told Chase that he's going to have to think of something different for you, and that's what he come up with so far.
Okay.
So
tell him nice try, but better luck next time.
I did tell him she's not going to be very impressed with that. So
exactly. Yeah. How's your Monday? Is it a manic Monday?
Kind of. I mean, I got lots of work done. I feel productive.
Yeah.
I cleaned my bathroom for you. So
oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll make sure to use the facilities while I'm here.
Okay.
Okay, I said I wanted to bring wine today, and it's because the case that I have is really tough. It's real tough. My plan was to just sit down and write this all in one evening, but it kind of drug out into a couple of days, and
it's never the way you think it's going to be.
Well, you'll see why.
Okay.
So let's just get this over with. It's taken me 2 years, over 2 years since we've been doing this podcast to tell this story. So, September 15th, 1999 was a Wednesday night. Well, it was a Wednesday. Okay. There was day and night that day.
It was.
It was a fairly new school year. I was a freshman in high school, so it was exciting times. Mm-hmm. In the morning before the school bell rang, I was hanging out in the hallway with my friends as per usual.
Right.
When our new friend, 14-year-old Christy, invited us all to go to church with her that night. You see, there was an event that morning called See You at the Pole, which is a prayer rally where Christian schools across the county
well, even public schools did it. We did it.
Yeah. So public schools started doing it.
Cool. I love it.
And actually one of the victims in this case, she went to a public school and had arranged one at her school. Oh. So you're right. I totally didn't think of that. But basically it's to pray for our nation, pray for our local communities, our leaders. And that's just what it was. So I didn't go to it that morning because, sleep. Am I right? it
Teenagers.
Took place before school. And I wasn't driving at the time, so my mom would have had to get me and my brother to school early. And my brother probably was not in agreement about that either. So, but Christy's church was having a concert that night called Saw You at the Pole.
Oh.
So 40 Days was a local Christian band that was going to be playing, and 14 other churches were invited to the event. So it was going to be a cool night. I had heard about it from someone else. I think it was all Baptist churches, and mine was a non-denominational church, but who cares?
Right. We're all believers.
We're all believers in the same thing. And I had heard about it from someone else at my school. So when Christy invited us, I was like, oh, cool. I totally heard about that. Christy was a new student at our school, and though we'd only known her for a month or so, she fit into our little group right away. Her mom, Debbie, was an elementary school teacher. She was new to our school as well. And my best friend Chelsea's mom was a teacher at the school where we went. It was a very small Christian school. So
close knit.
Yeah. And it just seemed like she just fit right in because, she was a teacher's kid and Chelsea was a teacher's kid, and she just kind of fit our vibe. She was fun and she laughed a lot. And I like to make people laugh. So we just loved her immediately. It might be intimidating for anyone to join a new school. But we had less than 30 people in our grade. So it was really small. So it was really hard to join a new school. Probably worse than joining a big school where you could just blend in. Yeah, you feel a little more seen. Exactly. Yeah. But she did blend in really well with us. And I remember when I first met her, not sure how it came up, but she told me she was born in Little Rock, Arkansas. And I thought that was funny because my dad is from Arkansas and I never meet people from Arkansas. Yeah. So I just thought it was cool that we had crossed paths, and we had both played volleyball. She was good. I was not. Well, you tried. I tried for a long time. Like, I'm surprised at how long I've kept trying. But she was really good. She started out on the junior varsity team as a freshman. So, wow, that is awesome. She had a beautiful smile, a clear skin, which stood out in our freshman age range. Days, yeah. And gorgeous, like this gorgeous head of thick, layered brown hair that just seemed to fall perfectly into place. I don't know if she did curlers or what it was, maybe a curling iron. I don't know, but it was beautiful. She had it all. She did have it all. And she was smart. She was part of the National Honor Society. She was sweet. She was gentle. And she had just this really pure character about her. You could just tell. Mm-hmm. She was friendly, but she didn't partake in trash talk like some of us at the lunch table did. Because she sat with us at lunch and she was more reserved. And while I was just the opposite, I remember her giggling anytime I would ask a question. She had just taken a bite of something, so I would do it on purpose. And I'd be like, so tell us, and I just, that's one of my favorite memories of her. What's your favorite color? And she'd be like, can't talk. So she thought that was funny. She probably thought I was nuts too. I'm sure she did. I am a little nuts. Just a little bit. I made her laugh, so that's all I cared about. I really enjoyed her company, so it was with regret that I had to tell her that I couldn't go to church with her that night because I'd already promised my cousin Elena that I'd go to church with her. Christy seemed pretty excited about the concert and her church, so I didn't even bother asking her if she wanted to come to church with me. Oh, right. I mean, honestly, back then, I probably would have been upset if you canceled on me, but to know that you're going to a fun concert at this church where this Christian band is playing, I mean. And I thought about inviting you to go with me there. And something, I don't know if it was God or something just said to me, Lena wouldn't want to go. And like you said, I wouldn't have broken plans with you. Right. But what if I had invited her? I think about that all the time. I doubt she would have come with me, of course, but it's still something that I can't stop thinking about when I think of her. Now, hundreds of people had gathered at Wedgwood Baptist Church for the Saw You at the Pole rally. The vibe was one of anticipation and excitement as youth across Fort Worth area gathered to worship with their friends. The church also held their usual Wednesday night activities in other areas of the church, like prayer groups and, singles and young adults groups. Choir and orchestra was going on in the nursery and kids church where they're receiving children. It was 15 minutes till 7 that night. Jeff Lassiter was standing just inside the foyer at Wedgwood Baptist Church with some church members when he saw a man pull into the parking lot, exit his vehicle, and begin walking around outside. Now, Jeff and the others standing by kind of watched him because they didn't know who he was, and they saw him walking towards the south entrance, which was where they were standing. And he had a cigarette, and he had just lit it. So they were like, oh, this is going to be like, what is he going to do? Just stand there and smoke it or come inside?
Right.
Deanne Simpson remembered seeing the man in the parking lot looking out of place, and she had just parked. So her first instinct was to go over and ask him if he needed help or needed directions. But she was already running late, and she wanted to just, like, the concert had already started, and she just wanted to get in there. So she just went in. As the man entered the door wearing sunglasses, and he's still smoking his cigarette.
Oh.
Jeff awkwardly reached out his hand to welcome the man to his church and politely asked him to put out his cigarette. And the man said, "Is this where that damn religious meeting is being held?"
Oh.
Before pulling out a gun and shooting Jeff twice. Jeff fell to the floor and watched as the man then shot his friend Sydney Browning 3 times. She fell back into the couch that she was sitting in and didn't move. The gunman continued shooting at others in the area. Some people were hiding behind furniture, and he was trying to shoot them. He wounded Jane Ann Brown, and he missed others. Then he asked, "Is this where that religious meeting is going on?" Again. He turned his back to the people that he had just shot and shot at to find his next victims. Now, there in the hallway, just a little ways down, was the merch table for 40 Days, the band that was playing. And it was manned by a kid named Kevin Gailey, who was wounded after being shot twice. Almost simultaneously, a man named Mike Holton walked through the hallway where the shots were ringing out and was shot at twice. He felt one zoom by his right side and one went by really close to his head on the left side. Mike turned and just ran to the library, where he was the first one to call 911 at 6:55 and 37 seconds. Just moments later, after encountering Kevin Gailey laying wounded in the hallway, a nursery worker, Lori, called 911 at 6:55 and 42 seconds. The 911 dispatcher who answered Lori's call had actually been to Wedgwood once.
Oh.
She had attended a sermon with one of her friends. So she was able to give emergency personnel specific instructions on, like, which way to enter, where the hallways were located.
That is amazing.
To be able to describe the most direct route into the parking lot would have been invaluable in shaving off precious seconds.
Because it was pretty big.
Yeah, it's a big church. But by the time police, fire trucks, and multiple ambulances arrived, the damage would have already been done. 19-year-old Jeremiah Neitz, I hope I'm saying that right, who was inside the sanctuary, heard popping sounds coming from just outside the door. He looked out of one of the windows on the door separating the foyer and the sanctuary, and that's when the glass just exploded. And he realized those firecrackers he thought he was hearing were not firecrackers at all. They were gunshots.
Wow.
He saw a man with a gun walking towards the door, and he shouted for everyone to get down. But it was dark. I mean, it was a concert. People were worshiping. It was loud.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many people heard him. Maybe the people just, like, close to him heard. But many people thought it was part of a skit.
Oh, yeah. I remember hearing about that.
Because there was a skit planned for the rally, and many believed this might be it, tasteless as it may have been in light of the fact that Columbine had just happened 5 months before this.
Yeah.
So that kind of was probably in the forefront of people's minds. Maybe they're reenacting, because let me just explain something to you if you don't know about us Christians. We love a skit. Okay? We love a skit. And we will take it where it needs to go.
You know what? I think I've told you about ones that we've done with our youth group in recent years. So
I mean, whether it's reenacting the crucifixion, you know, Christians don't shy away from getting their message across.
Right.
I've been in some really uncomfortable skits where I'm like, they went there.
Back then, yeah.
Oh, and back then you could say and do anything.
Oh, yeah.
Not these days,
No.
but back then we took it to the limits. So if you're thinking, why in the world would anyone think that was part of a skit? That's why.
Yeah.
You just have to kind of understand that culture.
Right.
So the gunman began walking behind the back row, shooting into the crowd of mostly young people while cursing and shouting blasphemous slurs. Kay Bynum immediately took shelter under her church pew and called 911 on her cell phone. Now, it was 1999 and cell phones were not in everybody's hands,
right.
But Kay had one. And in fact, that was the only 911 call made from inside the sanctuary.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. The shooter, seeing someone just outside the worship center through the glass, turned away from the crowd and opened the door and shot Sean Brown, and then briefly left the sanctuary, walking around and re-entering through, like, nearer the front.
Okay.
But through another door back
okay.
into the sanctuary. Another reason why, like, it felt maybe fake, because he just left. But no, he's back now. Mark Warren, frontman for the band playing that night, heard the popping sounds and thought his equipment was malfunctioning or something, but he looked down from the stage and he saw a man standing in the aisle reloading a gun. At this time, I think people were becoming more aware, like more people in the worship center were becoming more aware of the actual horror that had come over that church. People were running out of the church at this time. Some were running to other areas of the church to make sure that the children were evacuated.
Oh,
and there
wow.
were so many other people in the church in other areas, and they just didn't know what was going on. In the crowd were parents David and Trelissa Griffin. Their daughter Cassandra was sitting on the second row with 6 of her friends. And like cool parents, you know, they sat a little further back to give her space. The minute the shooting began, they hit the floor and tried peering over the pews to see what was happening. David, looking towards the stage to see if he could find his daughter, saw one of the men on the stage behind a speaker, and the bass player was just still playing. I mean, he didn't hear it. He
was
kept playing.
In the zone.
Yeah, he just didn't hear it. You got one band member hiding behind a speaker.
Holy moly.
People were ducking, but he couldn't see his daughter. So as the shooter reloaded round after round, shooting at walls and doors and people all over the sanctuary, he would say things like, "Are you ready to die for Christ?" Which kind of made it seem like it was part of the show too.
Right.
Because again, we would take it there.
Right.
I mean, not we, but I'm just saying, Christian, you know, in youth groups, I remember they would toe the line
because
big
the
time.
message is, are you ready to see Christ?
Yeah. So that's why I'm saying you just have to understand, if you've ever been to church in the 90s, I mean, like you said, these days it's a little bit different,
right.
But yeah, there was a very real possibility that this could be the skit. I remember, I read a book called Night of Tragedy, Dawning of Light about this night in particular. And I remember one lady said her daughter was in the skit, and when she heard the gunshot, she knew this was not part of the skit.
Oh, yeah.
So she was like one of the only people that was immediately on edge about it. It wasn't until people were seeing the death and destruction with their own eyes that they could no longer deny that this was really happening. An administrator named Debbie Gillette, who was working in the church office, heard the gunfire echoing through the hallways, and she wasn't really sure what she was hearing. She just kind of stopped what she was doing, and then she's like, oh, maybe it's part of the music or whatever. And so she turned her attention back to whatever she was doing, and a youth pastor came flying through her door saying, call the police, call the police. She picked up the phone, but all 6 lines were busy.
Oh.
So it could be that other people in the church were also calling.
Right.
Debbie began to shake because her daughter was in the sanctuary, sitting front and center. She tried calling her husband, who was actually a police officer, who was at home directly across the street from the church, but he didn't answer. She didn't know it then, but he was already on his way over.
Oh, okay. He had already heard.
Mm-hmm. You see, their yellow Labrador had alerted him that something was happening. And so he walked outside, and one of his neighbors said, something's going on over at the church. And he ran back inside, put on his suit, suited up, grabbed his gun, and he ran out the door across the street. At 6:59 p.m., a pipe bomb exploded. And we know this because dispatchers were on the phone with various callers, and they heard it go off at that time. Mm-hmm. The orchestra, who were rehearsing just on the other side of the wall from the worship center, heard the bomb go off, and they thought the band playing maybe blew a speaker until they started seeing bullets come through the walls.
What?
And then they evacuated. Jeremiah, the first inside the auditorium, that kid, Jeremiah Neitz, he was the first to hear the gunfire. He was hovering in place over his friend in one of the church pews when the gunman turned his attention towards him and began shooting at him. Oh. Before he really had time to register that this unhinged individual with a gun was headed in his direction, shooting at him specifically, he was face to face with the literal smoking gun. Uh-huh. He told Fort Worth Magazine that he could feel the heat from the gun on his face. It was that close. The gunman mocked him and said, "Do you believe in Jesus Christ?" And Jeremiah said, "Yes, sir, I do. I know where I'm going when I die. Do you know where you're going?" And something to know about Jeremiah is that he was recently saved.
Oh, wow.
So he had a little troubled history before this. So that personality of, I'm not going to take no crap, was still there. And he stood up.
But, also when you have a troubled past and then you come to know Christ and you change your life and you believe in God, your
priorities change.
To emphatically say,
right.
Yes, I believe, with a gun in your face.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know. It's so, I can't say that I would. I honestly can't say that if someone had a gun in my face that I would do the same. But it's just a testament to him. And for whatever reason, the shooter didn't just shoot him right there in the face. He walked away. By the time Debbie's husband, Chip, had made it across the street, the first officer was arriving on scene. The 2 men rushed into the church together, guns drawn, not sure what they were going to find. But a minute later, the gunman walked over to a nearby pew, sat down, and shot himself in the head. Like the little coward he is. As that final shot rang out, the 2 officers entered the sanctuary, almost simultaneously. A split second of silence and confusion filled the room before someone yelled out, "He shot himself, let's go." And people felt safe to get up and, people who were hunkered down hiding under the pews felt safe to get up and run out. That's when a youth leader named David Payton army crawled his way to the gunman. He just had this sense that he needed to get the gun out of his hands. He admitted I probably have seen too many movies, where you think the gunman's dead and then they get back up again.
Right.
So he crawled over there and pulled the gun out of his hand and made sure he was disarmed. At this point, some people still thought it was part of the show.
Oh, wow.
Even seeing blood, even seeing people fallen over and wounded, they still thought that.
I could not imagine.
In fact, one student remembers thinking the janitor is going to be really pissed about this because it's so messy.
Right.
Like
who's going to clean this up?
Exactly. She had blood on her clothes and she was like, "Oh, the janitor is going to really hate this." Despite everyone's quick action, the multiple calls to 911 from inside the church, and Chip Gillette, the off-duty officer living just across the street, the gunman shot himself at 7:02, and all the emergency vehicles arrived at 7:03. By the end of the chaos and carnage, 7 people would be dead in 10 minutes, including my friend Christy Beckel. Tess Price stayed in the worship center as first responders swarmed the auditorium. She was checking bodies to see if anyone was still alive and needed help. After checking 3 bodies that had no pulse, she came to Christy, and she said she was still breathing. So Tess shouted for one of the emergency men to come over and help her. Together, they laid Christy back, keeping her head slightly elevated. Tess began praying and stroking Christy's head. I'm sorry. I haven't cried about this since 1999, and honestly, a lot of this stuff I didn't know until I started researching this case. So she was begging God to save her. Christy moved her left leg and her arm a couple times and moaned, but it really was just a product of the head wound. She was not there. They rushed Christy to the hospital. Christy's mom, Debbie, heard about the emergency at the church and rushed over to pick up Christy. When she got there, the roads were blocked off. Only red lights illuminated the streets. By now, survivors and family were trying to locate their loved ones, gathering in the elementary school across the street from the church. Debbie was directed to head to the school to wait because officials weren't really sure. Because that bomb went off, they weren't sure if there were more.
Oh, yeah.
And they weren't sure if there was someone else. So they had everything blocked off for obvious reasons. Debbie was asking everyone if anyone had seen Christy, describing what she looked like, and no one had seen her. Debbie and her friends started calling around to hospitals in the area, but she didn't get anywhere with that because apparently there was a mix-up with Christy's identity. It wasn't until 11:15 that Christy was identified. And though she was still technically alive, she was brain dead.
Oh.
Debbie had to make the worst phone call of her life to Christy's dad, who was out of state in Arizona at the time.
O'Reilly! Check engine light on? Take the guesswork out of your check engine light with O'Reilly Veriscan. It's free and provides a report with solutions based on over 650 million vehicle scans verified by ASE certified master technicians. And if you need help, we can recommend a shop for you. Ask for O'Reilly Veriscan today. O'Reilly Auto Parts.
There's not much to tell about the shooter. His name was Larry Gene Ashbrook. You always got to put the middle name in there to humanize him, but he was garbage. He brought a 9mm Ruger and a .38 caliber pistol, along with over 200 rounds of ammunition with him that night. He had been exhibiting concerning behavior in the days leading up to the mass shooting, and even in the weeks prior to that. His neighbors described him as strange and secluded. He'd served in the Navy, but was discharged in 1983 for marijuana use, and ever since then, he had been anti-government. He became really paranoid as he got older, believing that the government was out to get him. And he had been living alone ever since his elderly dad had died, and he just spiraled.
Oh, I didn't realize he lived alone.
His dad lived with him for a long time. I think his dad had recently died, maybe in the year or so before that. Because Larry shot himself in the head like a little coward, his motives died with him. It seems like he was severely mentally ill. His anti-government stance has nothing to do with Christianity, but it was clearly a hate-filled crime against Christians. Why? We don't know. We never will. When police searched Larry's home, that's when they realized what a wackadoo he really was. He had poured concrete into the toilets and the drains. His house was in complete disarray. The washer machine and dryer were tipped over. Furniture was upside down. He had torn the house apart. He knew he wasn't coming back there.
Yeah.
But he didn't leave a note. There was no indication as to why he had it out for the Christians in particular, when he seemed so fixated and paranoid about the government. The long and short of it, like I said, he was just very mentally ill, and he was a ticking time bomb. So let's talk about the victims. Cassie Griffin, she was the daughter of David and Trelissa Griffin, who sat back so that their daughter could enjoy the concert with her friends. Cassie was 14 and had just begun her freshman year at North Crowley High School. She's the one who passed out invitations at her school to get people to go to see You at the Pole.
Oh.
She had joined the marching band, and she was really excited to play all the upcoming football games. She had been in jazz band in middle school and loved to sing, so music was just something that brought her so much joy. Her parents told Fort Worth Magazine that she was really tall, and though she gave basketball a try, she wasn't really into it. She just wasn't very athletic.
Gotcha.
Okay. She's like me, but tall.
Yeah. It's you always expect the tall people to know how to play basketball.
I know, right? It's like, oh, it'd be so great if you were good. But she tried, she gave it a go. And she started collecting frogs, I thought of you, when she was in 5th grade, and still loved accumulating the figurines and pictures into her teen years.
Love it.
Her mom remembers one time they went into a bookstore and Cassie spotted a poster that said, "Fully rely on God."
Oh, yeah. I had them too.
And she turned to her mom and said, "I have to have that poster. Now my frogs have meaning."
Yeah.
Cassie did fully rely on God and was thoughtful and a prayerful young woman. Her parents were incredibly proud of her. Cassie had spent 2 weeks leading up to that day, like I said, handing out invitations for See You at the Pole. She got a lot of her friends to come who weren't necessarily Christians, and Cassie's best friend was sitting right next to her when she was shot. Her little brother, Chris, was just 10 years old. I'm not sure if he was in the auditorium or if he was at the church, but he was not hurt. Sean Brown, 23 years old. He was a student at Southwestern Seminary, pursuing a Master's of Arts in Christian Education with a plan to work as a youth minister. The night before the shooting, he was speaking with his wife about what he'd been learning in seminary. He really seemed to be affected by studying spiritual warfare and how Satan works to tear people apart. Next morning,
if this isn't a prime example,
I know. The next morning, Sean met his wife at the elementary school where she was a teacher and attended See You at the Pole with her. He prayed for her students as they all held hands around the flagpole. Afterwards, he headed to work and then to school and was home by 4:45. After seeing each other briefly at home, they kissed and said, "I love you." And Kathy Jo went to pick up their friends' kids from baseball practice, and she would meet Sean at the church at the concert. When the shooting began, he followed a group of leaders to the church office to hunker down and call police. But everyone who filed into the office was really surprised when he didn't come in.
Oh.
He went back out. And that's when he was shot and they saw him laying in the hallway.
Oh.
I don't know if he thought he could help or if he went to go help someone else.
Right.
I don't know. But yeah. Joey Ennis was 14 years old. He went to Brewer High School. He was in 9th grade and he played as a point guard on the basketball team. He had recently been baptized at the First Baptist Church where he attended the youth group. He loved game nights and movie nights with his family. He was a huge Chicago Bulls fan, and he and his mom had just painted his room red and black the summer before. The night of the shooting, Joey wanted to bail on the concert at his church and hang out with another friend, but his mom reminded him that he had made a commitment to go with his cousin. So she said, you either go to church with your cousin or you're going to stay home. You can't just go with another friend.
Yeah.
He agreed, and he told his mom he loved her and went to his church, First Baptist. And from there, their youth group took a van to Wedgwood.
Oh, okay.
And it was kind of that way with the other churches that were invited.
Right.
A lot of vans were bringing in youth from other churches. The van full of kids arrived at the concert a little late because the driver was having trouble finding Wedgwood. See, this is what I mean by it was a big, there's lots of entrances to the parking lot. So they were having trouble finding where to park, but it was no big deal. They all hurried into sanctuary and took their seats and slipped right into worship. Sydney Browning was 36 years old. She was in the choir at Wedgwood and led the children's choir at the church. She taught at Success High School, which was an inner city school for troubled youth in Fort Worth. The night of the shooting, she did what she normally did on a Wednesday. She taught her classes from 4 to 6 p.m. and grabbed some fast food on the way to the church. She sat on the couch where she would hang out and chat with her friends. She would typically do that like on a Wednesday night before her choir practice started. Susan Kimberly Jones was 23 years old. She had just begun attending Southwestern Seminary, seeking a Master of Divinity degree. I don't know what that is, but it sounds cool.
Yeah.
She really loved going to school there. She had just started and she felt like she was on the right path. She felt like she was right where God wanted her to be, and she was excited to tell her friends all about it.
Love it.
The day she died, she went to school, then to her job at a Fort Worth area daycare. Every Wednesday, she'd head to church and attend a prayer service. But on that night, she was asked to attend the concert with the youth.
Oh, okay.
So she sat in one of the back rows and was deep in worship when she was shot. I like to think that she closed her eyes and when she opened them back up, she was in heaven.
That's a way to go.
That's how I like to think of it.
Yeah.
Justin Michael Ray, 17 years old, attended Casada High School and was going to be graduating that December. He was really excited. We usually graduate in the spring here in the States.
Yeah.
So, he was getting it in early, and it sounded like he was finished with a lot of his classes because he had a lot of flexibility to come and go from the school.
Oh, okay.
The sound guy at Wedgwood, Tim, had asked Justin to help him with some projects at Southwest High School. That's where Tim was a teacher. He was a production teacher. So after going to some morning classes, Justin went over to Southwest High School for a bit to help Tim out. Then he went and met a friend for lunch, went back to the school to finish helping Tim out. And about 3:30, he went to Wedgwood to help the sound guys set up. Though Justin hadn't planned to stay for the concert, they actually told him, "You can go ahead and go." And he's like, "Oh, I kind of want to stay. This is fun." The problem was he had a dinner date with his grandma scheduled.
Oh.
And so he called her and he's like, "Hey, Grandma, do you mind if we rearrange things?" And he's like, "I'm just having a really great time setting up." And it sounded like he was into all that stuff. So she said, of course. They set a different date, and
that's so cute.
He stayed for the concert. When the shots rang out, Justin was in the balcony recording the concert. Christy Beckel. Christy Kathleen Beckel was born January 16th, 1985. She was a member of the National Honor Society. Her mom taught second grade at Bethesda Christian School. Christy didn't have volleyball practice on that Wednesday, so she went home after school to eat before heading to church. She sat with her friends Jennifer and Cassie. Tess, the lady that stayed with her while she was dying, didn't know that Christy had died until a couple days after. And she wondered why. Why did she have to die? Yes, but also what was her part in it? Why would she find someone breathing and then they not be saved? She just felt like it was twisted and she didn't understand.
Yeah. I think that's a lot of questions that we ask, like, it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense, yeah. And she felt like, at the time, she felt like she had maybe saved someone's life by finding Christy and her being rushed off to the hospital, but she couldn't understand why it was all for nothing. But the truth is, it wasn't all for nothing. Christy was such a giving person, and her parents knew that she wanted to donate her organs when she died. Had she not been found still breathing, she wouldn't have been transported to the hospital.
Wow.
And they wouldn't have been able to harvest her organs.
Wow.
Her heart, liver, lungs, eyes, and many other beautiful, healthy, young 14-year-old tissues were used to help over 60 people.
That is so beautiful.
Over 60 people.
Wow.
Either live because of her or their life is better because of her.
Right.
So it wasn't for nothing. I remember being at home that Wednesday night, and it was late. It was past my bedtime. I don't know why I was still awake, but I was laying on the couch, and I remember the phone rang, and my mom handed it to me, and she's like, don't be long. It's late. You need to get in bed. And I hear my friend Shannon on the other line crying, saying there was a shooting at Christy's church, and she was shot. And she was in the hospital. I remember laying on the couch, and I just sat straight up and cried. I knew it was real, but I didn't know how, because I just saw her that day.
Yeah.
Like, my 14-year-old brain could not grasp this whole, like, I just didn't understand this. Then I started thinking, what if I went to church with her?
Yeah.
What if I had gone there? What if any of my friends had gone with her?
Right.
What if I went with her and they all scooted down on the row and I sat down where she would have been sitting and it was me? But it wasn't me. And I was very aware that I better not waste my time on this earth. We had an emergency chapel service at my school the next day. Counselors were ready and available for anyone who wanted to talk and needed it. My friends Vivian and Shannon had grown super close to Christy in those 4 short weeks. I think Shannon played volleyball with her, if I can remember that. But we leaned on each other. We were numb. I had questions for God, to be honest. I still do. I remember feeling like nowhere was safe. As I mentioned earlier in the episode, Columbine had just happened, and that was wild.
Right.
I mean, that was like one of our first massive school shootings that we talk about, that we can remember, that's defining in our years, in our generation, Lena. And I just thought, well, I could expect that at a school,
right?
Limited security, like people coming and going, like that just, it checks. But in a church, in a place of worship, I didn't understand that, and I still don't to this day, how you can feel so safe in a church. Now, 7 others were injured in the attack. 17-year-old Robert DeBoard, 16-year-old Justin Laird, 38-year-old Kevin Gailey, 14-year-old Nicholas Skinner, 34-year-old Jeff Lassiter, the one who was the first to be shot, 41-year-old Jaynan Brown, and 17-year-old Mary Beth Talley. Now, they all survived, and that's great. But there is more good to talk about. Kenneth Barr, the mayor of Fort Worth at the time, knew that something needed to be done about the mental health in his community. We grew up not talking about that. It wasn't, it's just something you don't talk about. It's something you cope with.
Right.
Like, stop crying and get over it,
or
type of thing.
Pray about it.
That's another big one. Like, how could people like Larry Ashbrook be festering in our community, right under our nose. And we say, oh, he's weird.
Yeah.
He's weird. And then it turns into this. Soon the mental health connection was organized. It's made up of providers in the mental health field who work together to identify mental health needs in the local community. The organization is still functioning to this day, and I'll link it in our show notes if you want to read some more about it. I think it's so progressive that the mayor at that time implemented this organization. And, we, like you said, pray about it. Feels like we might have just said, oh, let's just pray about this and heal and move on. And he was like, we have to do something.
In a teenage mind, it's like, how do you just rely on, like, you're trying to process it all. And praying about it when you have a relationship with God. Yes, you understand the peace. You have that peace from God. But those that don't, you can't just say pray about it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just really impressed. And honestly, like I said, there's a lot about this that I didn't know. Had there been a trial, I would have been front and center. Whether my mom would have let me or not, I probably would have been there every day for a trial. But this was 1999. I'm just impressed. There are hundreds of thousands of people living with untreated mental illnesses in our country. And if we can educate ourselves on some of those red flags, maybe we can actually help our community.
Right.
See something, say something, that type of thing. Remember Debbie and Chip Gillette, the off-duty officer and the administrator? Their daughter, Rebecca, who was in the crowd that night, was not injured. She ended up marrying Justin Laird, who was one of the people injured in the shooting. Oh. He was actually paralyzed.
Oh, wow.
He and Rebecca struggled with infertility and struggled to get pregnant due to his injuries. But with the help of science, thank the Lord, they were able to start a family. Now that tragedy, it will always be a part of my life. The short time me and my friends knew Christy just wasn't long enough. And as with any hate crime, hate never wins.
No.
It might feel like it in the moment, but humanity always finds a way to heal and rebuild and do good. For as much bad that's out there, I like to think there's way more good.
Oh, yeah. I agree. Love wins.
Love wins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you've talked about doing this case for a long time, and I've always been waiting. Like,
I know. So last year was the 25th anniversary.
Yeah.
I can't even believe that. And I knew the day approached and I was like, it's been 25 years, but I wasn't ready. I couldn't take myself to that place. And, this has been really healing for me in a lot of ways. Good. Because like I said, I didn't know a lot of this. I remember being 14 after this happened and listening to the Kid Craddock morning show, and they were laughing, and I just thought, how can you laugh?
Yeah.
How can you go on?
Yeah.
Like, how are you standing?
This happened in our community.
I couldn't believe how everybody was just going about their lives. And, these are the things that victims' families go through all the time.
Yeah.
Like, they're just expected to go back to work.
Yeah.
Go back to their commitments and function. And it's just, that's why we are so victim oriented, because we know, like, just the weight of it all.
Right.
And I barely knew her. Barely knew her. We were new friends. I really liked her. And I felt like something had been ripped away from me.
Yeah.
And for all the other reasons, the fact that I was a Christian and the fact that this was an attack on Christians, and
Yeah.
I didn't feel safe in church anymore. And,
Yeah.
churches started locking their doors and only having one entrance. Churches started having a manned, an officer, paying an officer to attend and sit out there.
Well, and in our church, we have a security group every Sunday and Wednesday. So, churches are still...
Oh, they still practice that.
Yeah.
I mean, it just never was like that before. And you think about a church, how many doors are there in a church? You've got side doors. You've got, and the church isn't shaped like a square. It's shaped like a who's a what's it. I mean, there's doors everywhere.
Yeah.
There's corridors, hallways. You can get to this from. So I just remember feeling uneasy.
Yeah.
A lot.
Looking behind your back at all. Yeah. I remember, so in our youth group, we would get in our van and go to different events like that.
Peaster.
Yeah. We did a lot of that kind of stuff. I don't know why we didn't go to Wedgwood, but hearing about that, and just after Columbine, and even at Columbine, the shooter asked a student, Cassie Bernal, "Do you believe in God?"
Oh, yeah.
And she stood up and she said, "Yes, I do." And he shot her. And so going from that to Wedgwood in such a close period of time, I mean, I think today, I don't go to concerts. I do not like to go to concerts. I don't like big big groups of people where I can't get out if I need to. And I think it stems partly from that.
Yeah.
So it affects a lot of people.
Yeah. And I've always, from probably since I was a teenager, looked for the exits. Anytime I go into a room, I'm looking for the exits.
Yeah.
After my first daughter was born, I had terrible postpartum anxiety. I had intrusive thoughts, and I just thought, where has this come from?
Yeah.
But there was a lot of things that were dredged up. I would have dreams, and
that protective, mother.
Yeah, but it was like catastrophizing. It was thinking of the worst case scenario. And honestly, I haven't talked much about Christy and, just kind of the survivor's guilt that I have a little bit. And her being taken away. We just met her.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
But she made an impact on your life. She made an impact on so many people's lives. And that's one thing we can ask God, why did you do this?
Why this route?
Why did you not protect her? But he knew that those people needed her organs, and it's not for us to understand. He has a plan.
Yeah.
But I love that you said earlier that it impacted you where you're like, okay, what am I going to do here on this earth? You let it make you or break you. And so
there was always Christy was like an anchor for me in a lot of ways, because there was a lot of stupid things I've done through my life, like risk-taking behaviors, not in a reckless,
right.
I wasn't trying to be reckless. It was just doing silly things that could get me hurt, could get me killed, could get me snatched. And I just remember thinking in my low moments, girl, you're here. Do something else.
Yeah.
Relationships, stop this madness,
Yeah.
So anyways, I'm glad I finally got to tell this story. It's so important that we are aware of our surroundings. We're aware of those weird people. Are they doing things that are dangerous?
Right.
Are they saying things that are concerning? Should we be notifying somebody? It just makes me wonder if someone might have called the police and said, I heard him saying that the government was out to get him, and I just think he's paranoid. What if the police would have gone to his house and that would have moved the needle a little bit and he would have done something else? I don't know. I always think about,
if he was a
the
loner,
butterfly effect.
Yeah. Were these guns his dad's guns? Did he go buy these?
Yeah, he probably
the
had
ammunition that's the thing. If he was a loner and didn't have any contact with the outside world, did his neighbors hear crashing around in his house when it was,
How did he know about the saw you at the pole rally? Like, I don't know. Did he see a flyer somewhere?
He very well could have.
Did he hear about it?
Maybe the news was okay.
He went there specifically.
Do you remember back in the day when we had you turn on a certain channel and it just scrolls the news, like what's happening in the area?
I do remember that.
Did that happen in 99? I just wonder.
I'm sure it happened in 99.
Anyway.
Yeah. It could have been a local channel. It's just weird.
We cannot think of the what ifs and the whys, but I'm so happy that you told their story and talked about those angels.
Yeah. I tried to learn as much as I could about the other victims, but obviously I knew more about Christy.
Yeah.
And her life and what it meant after she died and helped all those people. So,
well, that was great. Let's do it again sometime.
Let's do it. See you next week, guys.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Cousins on Crime. Get connected with us by becoming a free member on our Patreon. Or for just $5 a month, you'll have access to bonus episodes, discussion groups, and much more. If you can't afford $5 a month, we get it. Inflation, am I right? Please consider leaving us a positive review and rating wherever you listen.
And don't forget merch. Support our podcast and show the love by sporting t-shirts with our latest designs, or grab an evidence bag to keep the chain of custody for all your valuables. Don't forget to follow our show on your favorite streaming app so you never miss an episode, and get photos and updates on our Instagram at Cousins on Crime Podcast or our Cousins on Crime Facebook page. Have a case suggestion? Email us at cousinsoncrime@gmail.com.